We took our typical American grocery list to Cancun during our residency trip to see what life might really look like in Mexico. Could we find what we usually buy? Were the prices as low as people say? And would this kind of shopping actually work for us when we move to Mexico? Hi, I'm Nikki. Welcome to the Paws. This was more than a vacation errand. It was a glimpse into what daily life could be like. Here's what we found, what we couldn't, and what surprised us the most. So buckle up because this is going to be a long and in-depth, but hopefully informative video. But don't worry, I have added timestamps in the description in case you want to skip around. If you remember this list from my packing video during our first failed attempt at going to Mexico, then you know that we had very specific items that we were looking for when grocery shopping in Mexico. When you're in your 50s and 60s like we are, you become accustomed to routines and certain items that go along with those routines. So Don and we visited 3 grocery stores in all 3 areas we stayed in Quintana Roo. So one was Soriana and 2 Chedrauis. Hopefully I said that right. We actually had a hard time finding the Soriana in the hotel zone after our trip to the one in the same affidavit appointment. And we had an even harder time locating an ATM. I'll cover that experience at the end of this video. Okay, so it was already blistering hot in Cancun at the end of March when we went, and we walked a few blocks from the U.S. consular office to Soriana. And we saw the big sign. We went through the sliding glass doors and then nothing, no Soriana. We were surprised to find little shops and convenience stores inside. We were already exhausted from walking in the heat and waiting at the consular. We just wanted to grab a few things and then go back to our hotel and chill in that very chilly cold pool. We walked around the lower level looking for Soriana and we couldn't find it. We did find a pharmacy and convenience store and said, screw it, and just started grabbing a few items like coffee and water and beer. When I asked if the coffee they had was the only coffee in the store, the really nice gentleman in the convenience store told me there's a Soriana upstairs. So I made a beeline upstairs while Don waited for me on the lower level. This particular Soriana was pretty big for not being a standalone store. It seemed very well stocked, but wasn't particularly clean everywhere. I knew Don was waiting for me, so I worked fast. I was zigging in and out of each aisle, trying to spot the things on my list. I love fixing salads for lunch, and while I knew I wouldn't be able to get the Trader Joe's pecans that I like or the discontinued Panera Bread Asian sesame dressing that I so love, I get it on eBay, I wanted to see what other salad fixings I could find. I had no problem finding butter lettuce, cucumbers, Marie's dressing, and Italian dressing. The produce section looked very colorful and appealing. And what surprised me, though, was that the eggs were in the produce section, but not refrigerated. Now, I know that the US and a handful of countries still wash their eggs, and therefore they have to keep them refrigerated because of that protective coating that's been washed away. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that Mexico treats their eggs like a lot of other countries. It reminded me of going grocery shopping in Paris and seeing the eggs on the shelves there. Another item on our list was Heineken Silver Beer, which my husband has switched to from regular Heineken. And while I didn't find the silver version, I did find regular Heineken along with Dos Equis, which he likes as well. And a 6-pack of beer was about half of what it retails for in the United States. You can get a 6-pack of Heineken for about $5 in Mexico and just under $5 for the Dos Equis. Next up is pancake mix. Pancakes do not taste the same in Mexico as they do in the United States. They're rubbery. And I only came across packages of hot cakes, not boxes of pancake mixes. Now, this isn't a big deal because I actually like to make pancakes from scratch. If you know me, you know I love pancakes. And one of my favorite recipes is from the First Watch cookbook that Don bought me for my birthday a couple of years ago. I was also able to find honey and black and green tea. Although I've since removed most caffeine from my diet, which seems to be helping with my vertigo. Some mornings I like to have eggs and yogurt topped with granola and raspberries, and I had no problem finding either one. So I felt like things were off to a good start at Soriana. I was definitely finding a lot of things on my list so far, and a few things that surprised me, like gourmet jelly and Biscoff cookie spread. I even found Biscoff cookies, but only the round cream-filled ones, not the standard ones like you get on Delta Airlines and in most grocery stores in the United States. However, I did find them at Chedraui, next to those delicious Chockies or Chokies, chocolate chip cookies. Love those. Pasta and jarred sauce, that wasn't a problem. Plenty to choose from for quick spaghetti dinners. However, another pleasant surprise was the amount of variety of Asian sauces, even reduced sodium sauces. I would have no problem making a quick stir fry for dinner in Mexico. The next one was problematic though, especially for Thanksgiving. While I did see canned vegetables on the shelves, I saw no canned green beans at Soriana or Chedraui. And although I was able to check fried onions off of my list, making green bean casserole that way that I grew up on, it wasn't going to be possible in Mexico. I never saw cream of mushroom soup either. Now I know there's a lot of workarounds and I can make green bean casserole with fresh mushrooms and fresh green beans, but sometimes we just like the canned version from our childhood. We have a couple of Latin stores near our house, and oftentimes I'll go in to get chicken and pork from there rather than the big box chain grocery stores, as I find the prices are much more reasonable. As I've said in other videos, I think red meat in Mexico is going to take some getting used to, but I'm sure I'll adapt. Okay, let's talk paper goods, specifically toilet paper. We all go. And Don and I are pretty hardcore Charmin users. We like the green and blue packages, as well as Bounty paper towels. While I found single rolls of Bounty and Soriana, I was only able to find the red and the blue Charmin toilet paper. And just like in the United States, Mexico also had the mega supersized packages of Charmin. Another thing on our list was Persil laundry detergent, which I was able to find. But let me know in the comments why most of the laundry detergents were in packages rather than bottles, as we're accustomed to in the United States. There was definitely no shortage of laundry detergent and household cleaning supplies in Mexico. But there was a shortage of pet supplies. On our way back from Playa del Carmen to Cancun, we passed a chain pet store, but it never got a chance to go in and check out the dog and cat food. In both Soriana and Chedraui, there wasn't much to choose from for dogs and cats, and it was your basic, kind of low-quality pet food. So when we go back to Mexico, checking out a dedicated pet store would be at the top of my list. Soriana definitely didn't have a shortage of olive oil. It's very, very similar to what I can find in the United States. We're also not huge breakfast bar and cereal eaters, but just like in the United States, there was a dedicated aisle to those items. And although I didn't see Cheerios, it could have just been an oversight on my part. I did find Cheerios at Chedraui, but I wasn't expecting them to be in a bag rather than a box. It's really the only cereal that I like. When I went to Soriana, I was looking for coffee, and at the time, I was still drinking regular coffee, so I just grabbed a bag of whatever coffee looked good to me at the time. However, now that I drink decaf, that might be a little harder to find in Mexico, same as the United States. I order my decaf coffee from Amazon. I also noticed that a lot of liquid coffee creamers, along with milk, were kept on shelves rather than refrigerated. And I decided to try one of the box coffee creamers, and it was very tasty and thick. Milk was drinkable, but just like red meat, my taste buds, they're gonna need to adapt. So pasteurized cow's milk is found on the shelves. It's not refrigerated. It's because of the pasteurization process, either at a low or very high temperature, that milk can be shelf stable until it's open. Once it's open, it needs to be refrigerated. Okay, so that was my quick dash into Soriana and Cancun. In Playa del Carmen and Isla Mujeres, we found Chedraui's grocery stores. And if you saw my video on 24 hours in Playa del Carmen, then you know I got up, I got showered, and I walked the half mile or so to Chedraui. Okay, we made it. It wasn't too bad. It was mostly shade. I am sweating. It's hot and humid here. But there it is right there. Okay, we're gonna go in. Even though I have a hard time pronouncing it, hopefully I'm doing better, I really like Chedraui. It felt sort of like Costco meets Wegmans. Now, we don't have Wegmans in Florida, as Publix dominates the grocery chain market here and has gotten ridiculously expensive. I used to do all of my grocery shopping at Publix, but that's really not possible anymore. So now it's primarily Aldi and Walmart. I felt like Chedraui had a much better, more expat-friendly selection than Soriana. And that matched up to what I was reading on various Paws Facebook groups. I was able to spend a little more time in Chedraui since Don and I were loving our Playa del Carmen hotel and we weren't in a rush to grab the bus back to Cancun. So I was able to take a deeper dive into the aisles and compare to what was on my list. And I focused a lot on the dairy section as well as those lovely pastries. Don was also needing some Pepcid and we had it on our list. So I headed to the small over-the-counter pharmacy area first. I had no problem finding an equivalent version of Pepcid, which Don said worked even better than the name brand that he gets in the United States at a fraction of the cost. Chedraui's produce aisle was immaculate, with an even bigger selection than Soriana. It was here that I found croutons for my salads and fried onions that I use in green bean casserole. They also had this really cool section where they were making and selling fire-roasted peppers, priced anywhere from $1 to $2.50 USD. As I moved into the meat section, I was surprised to see this thinly sliced beef, and it was just kind of hanging out in the open. And when I Google translated it, it's special black pulp jerky. I'm assuming it's beef. Let me know in the comments if people take it home and let it air dry so that it toughens into jerky. I'm very curious about this. Okay, body soap, shampoos, toothpaste, all seemed very standard to what we have here. Because I have slightly wavy hair and like to wear it straight, I use Kerastase, which I have to order online. So before our big move, I would definitely do some research to see if I can still order it online or if there are any salons that carry it before I stock up on it. I also had no problem finding my Dove deodorant and other toiletries. I was also glad to see Suavitel in the laundry aisle, which I didn't come across in Soriana. So keeping with my same laundry products is not going to be an issue. Chedraui seemed to have a larger selection of pet food, but still kind of your lower end Purina dog chow, couple of middle of the road selections, and that would probably work just fine for our animals. We didn't find any specialized dog and cat food. Our cats ranged in age from 2 years old up to almost 11 years old, so I feed them Iams. And for our pug Pico, he gets Rachel Ray Nutrish, although I just recently switched him to something else. The cats also get Churu in the evenings, as does Pico because he thinks he's a cat dog. But I didn't see Churu in any of the grocery stores. None of the pets get wet food, as we have a couple of cats that like to projectile vomit. Chedraui also had a very nice selection of fresh seafood. So Don likes salmon, and I found it to run roughly what Publix charges for their salmon at the seafood counter. So no real savings there. And just like with that out in the open beef jerky, they had shrimp just sitting out in the open on ice. So I'm not sure if you just grab a handful or you ask one of the staff for assistance. Let me know down in the comments how that works. I will say that Chedraui had a great selection of different types of shrimp or prawns, which I don't usually see in the United States unless I go to a seafood market. Okay, back to the paper goods. So while at Soriana, I found Bounty and Charmin, and I didn't find either of those at Chedraui, which surprised me. But I did find Cottonelle. It's a little rougher on the backside. And the milk, it's in the toilet paper aisle, and it's cheap. It's about $1.50. So there was no shortage on coffee creamer with some familiar brands like Silk and the vegan Not Milk brand that typically can only be found in the United States in specialty stores like Sprouts and Whole Foods. Maple syrup, that was on my list, and Chedraui had plenty of options to choose from. Same goes for peanut butter and jelly. I found Skippy and Jif and Smuckers, as well as store brand options and specialty flavors like Reese's and Twix. And I haven't mentioned this before, but Mexico labels all packages of food that have excessive sugar and calories in hopes that you'll make better, more healthy decisions. And I think that's wonderful. And going back to Thanksgiving, for my dear husband, Don, Ocean Spray cranberry sauce was readily available, as was Libby's canned pumpkin. Also, when I make pancakes from scratch, I use evaporated milk, and that was available as well. As I went down the packaged bread aisle, I noticed something unusual. Most bread brands, they seem to fall under the larger Bimbo umbrella. So the packaging would look the same as like Sara Lee artisan bread, but instead of Sara Lee, the bread was labeled as Bimbo. I think Wonder and Ora Wheat were the only two brands that didn't fall under that Bimbo umbrella. I also saw Pearl Mining Company box pancake mix. I think back in the day it used to be called Aunt Jemima, which is something that I didn't see at Soriana. There was also Bob's Red Mill and Betty Crocker cake mixes. Unfortunately, they didn't have the Ghirardelli box brownie mix that Dawn and I love, so I think that would have to be another item that we have to bring to Mexico with us. And let's talk about the sugar substitutes. So Dawn and I like to use a stevia brand called Pure in our coffee and tea, but it's not readily available here in stores. Only certain Walmarts carry it, as well as Amazon. What I noticed in Mexico was that Splenda seemed to be the dominant sugar substitute. Chedraui had all kinds of rice and lentils and boxed pasta, as well as canola, vegetable, olive oils. I also had barbecue sauce on our list, and while there wasn't an abundance of brands like you see in the United States, what they did have would work for our needs. Same with buffalo sauce when I want to cook chicken wings for game day. Don likes mayonnaise and mustard on his sandwiches. I'm not a huge fan of either, but I did notice that they carried some of the fancier Dijon mustards and honey mustards, which I use to make mustard cream sauces for pork dishes, or when I make Caesar salad dressing. I even found what might work in place of my Panera Bread Asian sesame dressing. If you're not a meat eater, I found they had a pretty good selection of frozen plant-based chicken options, as well as Beyond Beef and sausage. I didn't see the Impossible brand though. And if you like your Ezekiel brand of bread, you're in luck, they had that too. Red Baron, which I'm not a fan of, seemed to be the dominant brand of frozen pizza, but there were some plant-based crust options as well. And there was no shortage of ice cream, which Don was happy about, and frozen Eggo waffles. We don't eat those, but in case you're looking for them, they were there. Chedraui had lots of yogurt choices, mostly drinkable though, which I tried right before my dentist appointment in Playa del Carmen. I prefer the Oui French yogurt brand, and while I didn't see that brand, Dannon or Yoplait, that would probably be fine. Also, if you like cream cheese on your bagels or like to make cheesecake, then you're in luck, as they have Philly brand cream cheese. I believe one of you asked me about heavy whipping cream. So I found whipping cream, but I learned that it's more of a sweet cream that you would use on top of pies or something akin to like Cool Whip, not heavy cream, which was on my list. So not finding heavy whipping cream, that was disappointing because I use it in a lot of things. But I did find mascarpone, which I use when I make tiramisu. And sometimes I'll put a dollop of it in my Alfredo sauce. So let me know in the comments if you've had success finding heavy whipping cream as well as buttermilk. Now I know there's a lot of online recipes for buttermilk, and the closest that I have found is not the lemon juice in the milk mixture, but the milk and yogurt combination, which gives you not only that thickness, but also the tang of buttermilk. I was able to find Ready Whip in the can, which I put in my coffee in the mornings, and canned crescent rolls. I didn't see Pillsbury canned cinnamon rolls though, but that's okay. I can make my own from scratch. So let's talk about butter. So I'm very particular about butter. I like European butter. I'm not crazy about the Kerrygold Irish butter, but I do like Plugra and French butters, which I have to go to specialty stores to find. Sometimes Whole Foods will have French butter, so I was very pleased to see that President and Lurpak are brands that are carried in Mexico grocery stores, salted and unsalted. And since I'm trying to eliminate some things from my diet, I have switched over to unsalted butter to keep my sodium levels down. Of course, if you're into margarine, you'll have lots of choices. I used to love red wine, and I would have a glass or two with dinner. And I've since stopped drinking altogether, as I felt like it was one of the contributing factors to my high blood pressure as well as my vertigo. However, if you also love red wine, there is no shortage of it in Chedraui. Also, we can't buy hard liquor in the grocery stores here in Florida. You have to go to a separate liquor store if you want like rum and vodka and tequila. But in Mexico, you can buy it in the grocery store. There is no shortage of sandwich meat to go along with the packaged cheese and bacon and hot dogs. So many hot dogs. You won't find your usual brands such as Boar's Head, Oscar Mayer, Ballpark. In fact, I didn't see any brand that I recognized. And unfortunately, I didn't get to try any sandwich meat, but I did try the hoagie rolls, which were delicious. The Chedraui in Playa del Carmen had a pizza station as well as a station for regional foods, and that part reminded me of Wegmans. The part that reminds me of Costco was the Chedraui in Isla Mujeres, which carried refrigerators and microwaves. The general setup also looked more like a big box warehouse store. And that makes sense because being on an island, it's a lot harder to get the things that you need. So why not pack it all in one store since land is at a premium on an island rather than several stores such as a Home Depot or a Lowe's, which Home Depot does exist in Cancun and Playa del Carmen. The pastry section is a fun experience. So you don't package up your own pastries and bread. You take a metal tray and some tongs, which I learned are found by the cashier, and you pick out what you want. You place it on the tray, and then you take the tray to be packaged and priced by an employee. Check out my videos on everything we ate in Mexico, parts 1 and 2, to learn what pastries were our favorites. Before I end this video, I promised to talk about finding ATMs in Mexico. So we had terrible luck with this in Cancun and Playa del Carmen. We went to a couple of banks, but the language barrier, it just caused confusion on both parties. So one bank employee told us the ATM was around the side of the building, which it wasn't. It wasn't until we got to the Chedraui and Isla Mujeres that we found an ATM. Actually, we found a row of machines at the entrance, and we were overwhelmed as to which one we wanted to try. We picked the Bank Norte or Bank Norte machine. I think it was just because it was the most lit up. We knew from reading several forums that you should always decline the exchange conversion question, which we did, and we were able to change the language to English to make the transaction easier. Now, keep in mind that regardless of which language you pick, the machine is only going to dispense pesos. So I chose to withdraw 2,000 pesos, which is around $1,100 at the time. We were charged a VAT fee of 58 pesos plus an 8% markup fee, which no one had mentioned on the forums. So in the end, when Bank of America also charged their fees on their end, I believe that $100 actually cost me $13 in fees, even when I declined the conversion fee. So before we move to Mexico, we will definitely do a deeper dive into the banking situation and how to bank smarter to avoid the high fees. Because remember, that was just $100. Think about what it would have been like had I taken out $1,000. So I hope you found this video useful on grocery shopping in Mexico. Did we find everything on our list? No, but I think we found enough to be able to enjoy some creature comfort foods, as well as embark on some new foods and traditions while living in Mexico. And if you like this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe so I can continue to bring you more content about Mexico, Tampa, downsizing, paying off debt, and some other ideas that may be coming to fruition in the near future. I think you'll want to tune into that. Until next time, thanks for watching, and hasta luego, my friends.